Now, folks, we can't move on without going through the most key witness in the Alex Murdaugh trial, which would be Dr. Kinsey. Now, he came through as an expert. Now, I do have my reservations about experts that are called into trial, but in this case, he did a phenomenal job. Now, let's get straight into it and see exactly how this was one of the key aspects that really sent Murdaugh behind. Let's check it out.
And just very quickly, what are some of the types of things that you reviewed as part of your process?
When I do a reconstruction, I look at the available evidence as I feel it's pertinent to help me answer some questions. And the questions that or the things I wanted to accomplish from this reconstruction, you can determine sequence, you can determine movement. A lot of times you can determine the number of blows, or in the event of a hand-to-hand combat or a firearm was used.
So basically, he's saying he can figure a lot of shit out just by seeing the room. You know what I mean?
Those kind of things. So I examined forensic reports that were issued by law enforcement laboratories. I also examined extensively photographs that were taken on the scene, measurements, that kind of thing, and I also responded to the scene. It was rather close, and I took my own measurements.
First of all, I just want to say this dude is thorough, and you could tell this man loves his job. He loves firearms, he loves his job, and he cares a lot about the truth at this point of his career, so attentive, very sharp, not good for Alex. Let's keep going.
You responded to the scene. When did you first get involved in this guy?
The end of 2022, and I'm not talking about when the scene was actually going on. I went after the fact and did my own measurements.
All right. And when you were retained by the state in this case, were you told any particular goal, or were you told to just take a fresh look at it and offer your opinions?
I was told to look at all of the evidence and determine what I may be helpful on, and to use my own judgment objectively, independently, and come up with my own conclusions.
Interesting. Now, my question is, now this is a good theory in thought, right? It's a good theory that he doesn't know anything about this trial. They're just like, hey, check this out. Look at that. What do you think about that? All these facts. What do you think? Do you think, just tell us what you think, unbiased. But in reality, I think this town is so small, he had to have known what the material he was looking at was for. Obviously, the second you see it, you're going to be like, oh, that's Alex. But even before then, I feel like he heard about it, so he already preemptively had an idea, had his own thoughts. But that's just my opinion.
All right, let's talk about, if we can, and again, we're going to have to deal with some of, maybe not the images as much, but deal with some of the injuries that Maggie and Paul suffered, correct?
Yes, sir.
Let's, if you could, just remind the jury, what were the injuries that Paul suffered, please?
They were very, very severe firearms injuries. One was a shotgun wound to just a little anatomical left of the midline of the body. One was to the shoulder, and it proceeded into the jaw and ultimately into the head.
Damn. So he shot him in the chest, hit him through the shoulder, and went through his jaw and into his head. Bro, how do you do that to your own son? That's crazy.
And
they say gangbangers are terrible. They call gangbangers demons and all that shit, but this guy is the real demon. He's out here going hard, putting in work on his own family. Sheesh.
Was that the first injury or the second?
The first injury was the shotgun wound to the middle of the chest, and it was
and he was still alive, so he popped him again.
Non-fatal, at least not fatal immediately.
And then what about the second injury?
The second injury was immediate death.
Fatality. He wanted to say immediate fatality, but he changed his mind.
And were you able, in reviewing the crime scene evidence, to come to any conclusions as to the order in which Paul suffered those gunshot wounds from the shooter?
Yes, sir, I was.
All right, and please relate that to the jury.
My conclusion was that the first non-fatal wound to the midline of the body occurred as Paul was standing with his body canted in the middle of that dog food room.
Now remember, Now, remember, if you go back a couple of videos, the body cam with Alex Murdaugh calling the police, there's that little shed where the police were checking out all the blood and all the guts and the bullet shells and all that. There was a door frame, and this is what he's referring to.
Pointed slightly southwest, and the shot entered the midline of his chest, exited his underarm, entered his underarm on the actual arm, and exited the outside of his arm, and most of those 9 pellets proceeded through the back window of that dog food room.
Right, and then just real quick, you said 9 pellets. So
He's like, hold on, you're being a little too thorough here. It's a little too much info. Hey, I just want to shout out that the 3 lawyers at the front all have red ties on. That's crazy. I wonder if they called each other and was like, hey, what kind of tie you wearing today? Anyway.
explain that to the jury why you say 9 pellets.
That double-aught buckshot shot shell contains 9 pellets and I guess you describe it as a styrofoam packing to keep it tight so it doesn't shake. And when that cartridge is expelled out of the end of that barrel, the styrofoam packing dissipates or goes its own way, and those projectiles continue in the correct path.
And hold on for me real quick. I want to get a couple things marked.
I didn't know that. See, this is why I need to get a shotgun next. Man, I'm going to get a gun. I'm going to get another gun soon. I'm going to get a shotgun next because I didn't even know they packed the shells with styrofoam. Alex looked like he's panicked. He always looks panicked. I don't know.
And see if you recognize these particular images.
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, and tell the jury just generally what these are, please.
These are views of the floor of the feed room and a view from the entrance to the feed room and some digitally placed legs that I placed in there to show Paul's approximate position in that feed room at the time of the shooting.
Your Honor, at this time,
Dang, he put a whole holographic man in the room to demonstrate. It's crazy what technology is doing nowadays. You can't get away with stuff like this. I'm telling you, they lived way out in the woods, right? He thought he could get away with it because they were so secluded. Nope. Now you're on YouTube.
all right, I'm going to put 531 up on the screen here. Make sure we can see it all right. All right, Dr. Kinsey, you were talking a little bit about Paul's positioning and his location when that first shot happened. And if you could tell the jury your conclusion as to where he was located when that shot was fired. And then if you want to, step down, and if you could.
Those feet look creepy, bro. I don't know. Maybe it's because the room is a little dirty and shit, but damn, that is creepy.
Maybe point out what was added to this image to kind of reflect your conclusion in that regard.
Thank you.
And there's a dowel stick right behind you if you want to use that.
Okay, as you see here, those are the digital legs that I placed there showing Paul's approximate position as he was standing when he had the first gunshot wound.
The creepy ass digital legs.
Here along the floor, what you see are passive or 90-degree blood droplets. And when blood, you can tell a lot from the direction of blood by the way it strikes an object. Blood has a cohesive factor. It's viscous. And you probably heard that term before with the motor oil for your car. It's thicker than water. And the thing that causes that blood droplet to change shape is the friction and the direction and how much force was used. Well, a 90-degree drop just is exactly that. It's perpendicular to the ground.
Straight down.
So these 90-degree drops right here tell me that Paul was standing there for a moment. Can't tell you how long.
Oh, that is crazy how they deduced that. So if it was water, if your blood was watery, your blood probably would go a lot, like all over the place, but because it's so thick, it dripped 90 degrees straight down.
But those drops were running down from that wound on his arm, more than likely his arm, because his chest area had a shirt on it. It takes a little while for that blood to make it through the shirt, but it'll run down the outside of your arm and drip off your fingers. And you can see these 90-degree droplets here, here, and then they actually lead to the door. You can follow the
He's
path
trying to get
the
out.
door. He's not moving very fast because most of them are almost perfectly circular or 90 degrees. Had he been moving real fast, you could see some directionality in him, a tail, because the tail always tells you the direction with a blood drop. So I know he was moving slowly, and I know he was standing in the middle of this room for some time after the first shotgun wound.
And that makes sense because the first shot was bird shot, so it would like blow him back, but probably not blow him down. Because if he got hit with a buckshot, it just crossed my mind, like a shotgun will blow you away, but not if it wasn't buckshot. If you hit him with bird shot, then you might be able to stumble around. That's why they wanted to point out those points that the loads were consistent with every gun, birdshot then buckshot.
All right, and approximately how far was Paul inside the feed room? Can you describe a little bit about the dimensions of the feed room and your conclusion as to how far within the room Paul was when he was struck by that first blast?
Yes, sir. Well, the feed room is 10 foot deep by my own calculations and by looking at the other sketches. And where you see his feet here is just on the other side of the halfway point. So I went,
5 feet
I'm
in?
guessing, because I have no way of running a tape measure, because when I went there, everything was moved. But this door is 36 inches, and it's approximately 1.5 feet, 2 foot past the door. So that's how I come up with that determination. And he's just on the other side of the midpoint of that 10-foot room.
Yo, this guy is a genius, bro. I mean, I know he went to school for this shit, but damn. So he measured the length of the entrance of the door and then kind of just digitally turned it around is what I'm understanding. And then he was like, okay, if that's that long, I'll just add a few more imaginary inches until I get my length. And that's about 2.5 feet away from the door. Dude is a wizard.
Which is about how far from the doorway?
5 foot.
All right. And I'm going to show you what's been marked as 534, states 534, and see if you recognize that.
I do. Yes, sir.
All right. And tell the jury what that is real quick.
That is a general view from outside the feed room that was taken at the time the crime scene was originally processed. And I added a digital enhanced arrow showing the reader or the viewer the direction of the shot path.
Right. This time it offers states 534 and
Now, keep in mind, the defense want to say, oh, 2 people came through and shot them up, which is crazy because now there's more people getting away that would leave more of a footprint behind, but you can't find anything. So you had Bond and Bourne just up in there doing their thing and dipping out. No trace.
All right, I'm going to put 534 up on the screen, and if you would, just show that arrow that you're talking about that's been added to this image.
Yes, sir. Right here.
All right, and then as well, just show generally where those blood spots are. It's not the best image in the world, but where those blood spots are that led to your conclusion about Paul's location within the feed room when the first blast struck him.
The
Where the
placard
fuck's
hasn't
the arrow?
been moved, although it's hard to see the droplets. And of course, I didn't add the legs to this, but just on the other side of that placard, and then you have here a quantity of 90-degree blood droplets with a partial footwear impression in it. And then you can follow the blood droplets to the door.
And just real quick, I've got 533. I'm going to put that up on the screen. And again, is that just a close-up of where Paul was standing about 5 feet or so inside that?
The reader understand the flight path in hand.
And see if you generally recognize those images.
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, and generally explain to the jury what these images are, and then we'll talk about them specifically.
Those are images at the door that I've added some visual enhancements to help the reader understand the flight path of the second shot and the different elements that I looked at in determining where the shooter was for the second or the fatal shot to Paul.
All right. Your Honor, this time I'd offer states 535, 536, 537, and 538 in evidence, I believe without objection.
No objection.
Admit it.
All right. Let's look first at 535, and before we get to that, generally describe again to the jury your conclusion as to that second injury suffered by Paul, the fatal shot as you've described it.
Well, the first thing is, once Paul received that second shot, he never walked again. He never made any movement. Any movement he made was involuntary, and it was due to gravity.
So basically, the second shot sent him home. So it was the kill shot. There was no more life after that.
Pulling his body down to the ground. When you sustain an injury to your brain like that, that ceases all movement. So he was found outside the feed door. He fell over forward after sustaining that movement. Some wounds are fatal later. You can actually see someone that receives a fatal wound, and I've seen them run 100 yards. They can move for a little while. This is not that type of wound. Once he received this wound,
Is he actually crying this time, or is he capping? No, bro, I don't think he is actually crying. He's really red. It's getting kind of convincing, but I actually don't think he's crying. Look closely.
ceased all movement.
And did you, I'm going to put attachment.
He's not.
Excuse me, stage 535 up on the screen. And tell the jury what.
Right before the screen cut, he wiped underneath his face. There was nothing there. Nothing there. I'm so glad he went to jail.
This particular image reflects, please.
Yes, sir. If you can look at the green funnel that I've added just visually, if you look at that green funnel, that is approximately the shot shell path, the shot path from the shot shell after it did the injuries to Paul, or the direction of the shot from the shot shell. And I determined that by shot shell pellet defects that are still in the door, even though the door had been cleaned. I went and looked at it myself, run my own measurements, took the width of the door. I took Paul's approximate height. It's listed as several different things. DMV shows him at 5'6". The pathologist listed him, I believe, at 5'9", so I had to split the difference. I went somewhere in the middle. Then I deducted the...
That's a lot of inches that are unaccounted for. What was Paul doing? Nah, but this is actually crazy. He actually can see the height of the person, because they're saying no one that was like 6'2" or whatever could have shot this person. But if you keep in mind, the feed room had like a little height to it, so Paul would have been standing there, and this would be where the hand of the shotgun was. If you're holding it, hip fire, bang. Easy. He could have even been aiming it, depending on how tall this is, but he'll tell us in a minute.
Distance between the top of your head and the top of your shoulder, so I took another foot off. Then I took the width of the door, and there's one other thing I looked at, and that was a void pattern that's on the door frame of the door. A void pattern is caused by something being there when the blood and biological materials are let, we call it a bloodletting from the wound, and there's a void pattern, which tells me something was in that way.
Something was in the way of all the other blood.
Because of the narrow door, in my opinion, it was Paul. So that's what caused that void pattern on that door. So I used all of that, and I used a dowel rod, and I used a protractor on the doorknob side of that door frame, and I ran it up, and that's what helped me establish the angle of that shot pattern.
Bro, let's just take a moment of silence for the detail that Dr. Kinsey put into this shit. I feel like they ruined this crime scene, number one. They completely thrashed his crime scene. They were cleaning shit. They were walking all over it. They were letting family members come through. And he still got to the bottom of it. He was like, all right, screw it. We have a fucked up crime scene. We're still going to find our guy. And you know why? It's because he just loves his job. That's what you need to do. That's what you need to do. Love your job, and you'll be the best at it.
All right, and we're going to use the images to kind of talk about that a little bit more specifically, but quickly I want to show you 539 and 540 and see if you recognize these images.
Yes, sir, I do. 540 is my photograph when I visited the scene. And 539 is also my photograph, and it shows that top hinge of that door is approximately 72 inches at the top of the hinge.
All right, let's, if you could, I'm going to ask you to step down again. I know I just sent you back there, but come on down. I'm going to put 539 up on the screen, and if you could. Tell me what this image reflects, if you would, please.
Yes, sir. These are 36-inch standard yellow yardsticks. We use them to measure certain things, and it right here is the top of the top hinge. It's a 3-hinge door. And
Why don't they just have a tape measure? I think he chuckled because even he knows his method of measuring is kind of stupid. But hey, you got what you got, and it worked.
this is the top of the hinge, and then 4 inches above this are where those shot pellet defects were that I used to figure out my angle.
All right, I'm looking at 540. Who took this particular image?
I took this image.
So this would have been long after the actual event occurred, is that correct?
This was last December. Yes, sir.
All right, and tell the jury what this image reflects.
You can still see the pellet defects in the door, and this is the approximate center of it here. So that's 4 inches above 72. That's approximately 76 inches on an 8-inch door.
I'm going to show you states 536 and explain to the jury what this is, and in particular how that's relevant to your conclusion about the angle in which Paul suffered the fatal head wound.
This is the original crime scene pictures. And this is where the pellets took their path. This is where they struck and did damage to the door. And you can actually still see the dents that are documented in my photograph. You can see them in the original crime scene. This is the concentration of blood that's caused by the brain exiting Paul's body in the path of the shot shells.
The brain exiting Paul's body. Holy crap. I can imagine seeing that shit in real life. Fuck. He really got his brain blown out.
And then you also have biological material, hair and blood, here at the top of the door frame. And that's where I drew my conclusion. At some time, those body parts made contact with these sections of the door. And my opinion is that it hit here, and then landed on the sidewalk.
Looking at states 537.
His brain literally exited his head and fell on the sidewalk. Yo, Alex Murdaugh is crazy, bro. He's worse than any thug, any criminal I've heard of. Like, this dude is wild. And that was the first kill. Remember, Maggie's up next. She's got next.
Can you explain what the jury's seeing in this image and how it relates to your opinion about the manner in which Paul suffered that fatal wound?
I can. With a major bloodletting, especially.
Dr. Kinsey, let me ask you to, I'm going to move this podium and actually ask you to step back just a hair so that the jurors over here can see what you're saying.
Yes, sir. With a shotgun wound, you know, you've got not hundreds, you've got over 800 pellets that are making damage. It's not like a projectile, a single projectile from a pistol or a rifle. So there's mass damage, and it throws body fluids and blood in several different directions, but they follow the path. When I mentioned that it was a void pattern, this is the last blood drop. You can see it in the photograph that I can see, and it's approximately 5 foot. Right
Just in case you guys don't see it, it's, I think, underneath the green line he's pointing at.
there. And this is not green tape. That is a digital effect I put on the photograph to show the void I was talking about.
Man, it is underneath the green line, that little drip of blood. That was the last piece. But man, if he needs me to edit for him, he just needs to hit me up, bro. Like, put an arrow, dog. Like, what software did he use?
So at some time, it's my opinion that Paul was up against that door or real close to that door to keep that blood from striking the door at the point in time that he was shot.
All right, and the green tape reflects that blood pad or that void area that is consistent with Paul blocking that area. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Digital tape. It's not really tape.
All right. Well,
Yes, sir.
So that's been added to.
Yes, sir.
Okay. To illustrate.
Oh, I'm wrong. Okay, so that's like where the blood is flying everywhere from his head. His back was up against the door, and that's the area where there's no blood by the green. Got you.
Your opinion, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then 538, I'm going to show you this image. And again, if you can point out what's been added and how this relates to the conclusion that you're offering to the jury.
Yes, sir. One thing that I looked at to determine that it happened in the doorway and a little bit outside the doorway.
All that is blood on top of all the paint canisters, all that shit. But it's like you said, it's following the flight pattern. Now imagine you're outside and he's shooting in, and you're like at the edge of this door frame is where your back is against, and he shoots at you. All that blood is gonna fly kind of sporadically and crazily, but still in one direction. And if you see all the spray paint cans, all that other shit covered.
More outside than inside. You don't just look for the presence of biological material in blood. You look for the absence of biological material in blood. Here at the top, it didn't have a scale or a ruler, so I can't tell you exactly, but looking at some of these other objects, I was able to scale it approximately 4 inches. Up here, you have a void. So I know that it happened, the second wound happened far enough outside of that door frame that the actual frame kept the biological material from hitting at the very top, right here. I also looked at these items. You got some medication, canine medication, or some cleaning materials and that kind of thing up here. You can see all the spatter at the front of those containers. Yep. And then we got what I call a demarcation line right here, and I drew it through most of these cans. And that separates the blood contaminated area and the clean area.
Yep, and it shows a perfect angle. It's almost like when you lick your finger and you put it up in the wind and this side dries and this side stays wet. It's kind of like it's showing you direction. It's the same thing with a crazy gruesome scene like this.
So that tells me that it was at least forward of the angle on those containers.
Yep.
And that's why I believe he was shot. The second wound happened just outside the door frame, but his feet were probably still in the door frame.
Probably
Just
blew
a
him
quick
back.
point to the jury.
All those
Can we
canisters.
see part of the door frame in this particular image?
You can, yes, sir, right here.
I just pointed it out. Yep.
All right. Once, and going back now to States 535, and just for the record, we were just looking at States 538 and 537. Going back to States 535, did you reach a conclusion as to the location of the shooter on that second fatal shot that Paul suffered to his head?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right, and explain that to the jury, if you would, please.
The shooter was right here. If you're facing that door, to the right of the doorway, outside.
And would you have expected there to be, in that particular range, any sort of biological evidence in that area in proximity to the shooter?
Yes, sir, I would.
Would the door frame have potentially blocked any of that as well?
It would block some, and just depending on the positioning, how much of the body of the shooter was exposed. Because, once you have that kind of catastrophic injury, it's real fine blood particles and biological fluids that go in all directions. And the closer the shooter was to the muzzle, to the exit end of that firearm, the more stuff you would expect.
Let me ask you this.
And keep in mind, the prosecutors are going with, he had like this blue raincoat shit on so that it could like protect him from all the blood splatter. And so when he leaned in, there would be like blood on it and gunpowder residue. And the closer he was, so they're trying to further prove that he was hip firing the gun like in the corner at Paul. So
In your expert opinion, is there any way that Paul's fatal head injury came from the top in a contact fashion or a close fashion?
No, sir, I see no possible way for that.
And explain.
No, and I mean, I'm a regular person, and I can tell that he got shot from down up. It wasn't from the top of his head. Everything in that room points the direction of the blood splatter. It's quite simple. Well, it's quite simple to kind of just assume, but he got all the facts right and proved it.
Explain your conclusion in that regard to the jury, please. What factors weigh against that in your expert opinion?
Well, number one, I don't know of a way to mimic this blood evidence on this door, that pattern where that shot traveled through Paul's shoulder, into his jaw, into his brain, and then took a path up and placed the biological material here at the top of the door. If he was shot in the head, then you'd have biological material out here on the ground, or at least going down, on the sidewalk in front of him. And it would be different than just free pouring blood. You would see this pattern, and you would see those high velocity blood droplets there on the ground. And plus the shooter would have to be on the roof to shoot down into him, but you wouldn't have this on the door.
So basically, it would be more of a bloodbath everywhere because his head would basically have exploded from top down and it would have just splattered everywhere. That's kind of what he's trying to say. But if you shoot him from down up, all the blood is going to go everywhere, but in one direction. And the stuff is not going to fall it's not going to fall straight on the floor like as if they're shooting from the top. So, I mean, bullshit on Alex. Like, come on.
In your expert opinion, did you see any support or evidence in this crime scene that could support that the injuries suffered by Paul were in any manner a suicide or self-inflicted?
I don't see the possibility, knowing that it's not a contact shotgun wound, and I'm fairly strong, and I'm bigger than Paul was, and I don't know of any way you could hold that shotgun out and shoot yourself in that direction at that angle and put that biological material on top of that door like that. I don't think it's possible.
All right.
Yeah, if you're trying to go Nirvana on us and shotgun yourself, that's pretty impressive to reach out, put it by like a hook or something, and blast yourself in that perfect angle. It's impossible. So let's rule out the two shooter theory because that shit don't make no sense. All right, y'all, this is the first start of Dr. Kinsey. Let me know if you guys want to see more. I'm pretty sure you do. Yeah, it's a crazy breakdown. I completely forgot he even did all of this to bring him down. So if you like the video, let me know. Stay safe, stay inside. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Hold up real quick. I gotta shout you guys out for getting me up to 2K, right? 2K subscribers. I love you guys. Get me up to 3K. Make sure you tell your grandma, your auntie, your niece, your nephew, your cousin. Tell everybody, hit that subscribe button. Love you guys.